creator and host of Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, Emmanuel Acho.
Hello, 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 beautiful people. How are we doing? Good, good. Shout out to the one, what's up? I appreciate the energy. Now look, if we are not the most fun panel, shame on us. Shame on us. I think we got 55 minutes of your time. Appreciate y'all hanging out with us. Obviously, y'all could be doing anything, anywhere. Y'all could be at any one of the panels, and you all are here. Maybe you got lost. It doesn't matter. You're here now. With that being said, incredible panel of people. It's a privilege for me to be able to sit up here with everyone. They've done so many things. I'm only going to give you top-line items because, in all honesty, I don't have the time for all the resumes. Let me start with the person next to me. Absolute media savant. More than anything, I think you have the coolest name in all of the industry. Okay. Willow Bay. Like, what? Who thinks of that? Brilliant. But with that being said, Dean of Annenberg School, USC, just journalistic brilliance. To her left, Sam Kennedy, CEO of the Red Sox, CEO of Fenway Sports Group. We will get into all of those things later and momentarily. To his left, my friend, the one and only Rich Paul, CEO of Klutch. He and I go back. Glad to be up here with my brother. To his left, the one and only A-Rod, Alex Rodriguez, player turned owner, Rangers, Yankees, champion, amongst other things. To his left, Jason Wright, my brother as well. We've done several of these panels together. First black team president in the National Football League, former team president of the Washington Commanders, helped with the draft that was just announced, helped with the stadium that was just announced. So all in all, a bunch of brilliant, brilliant minds up here that I am honored to get to learn from, and hopefully over the next 53 minutes and 20 seconds, you all will get to learn from as well. Questions, we will do those at the end. Right now, though, I just want to curate an environment, safe, fun, informative, about sports, the world of sports, all of the things. So much is going on in the world of sports. I'm tired of talking. I want to hear from people smarter than me. Willow, I want to start with you, because beyond what has gone on as of late, NBA playoffs, that's kind of the current thing, I want to start with the fact that sports has grown in a major way, in large part because women's sports has grown in a major way. And the women's sports bucket pours into the larger sports bucket. It's not just women's sports, it is sports. What is your emotional response to the rapid trajectory and rapid growth of women's sports over the last, you could suggest 48 months?
Well, thank you. First of all, thanks for being here, and thanks for making sure that we are the most fun panel of the day. No pressure. So, you know, when I think about what is going on right now, I believe this is an historic moment in sports, not simply an historic moment in women's sports. And when you look at what's going on right now, when we think about, we have never been a more polarized nation, yet we are coming together around live sports in greater numbers than we ever have before. The way we consume media is more fragmented, almost hyper-personalized, yet we are still showing up at the same time to watch and engage in sports. And at the white-hot center of all of that is the growth of women's sports. What Emmanuel didn't mention is that my husband and new co-owner and I, Bob Iger, are now owners of Angel City Football Club. So we were able to join this incredible record-setting, industry norm-defying sports team at a moment where we think we can help accelerate the growth, not just of Angel City Football Club and women's soccer, but women's sports and the sports ecosystem as a whole. So women's sports, white-hot center of it all.
Jason, Ariel Investments, where you head right now, multi-billion-dollar investments fund in large part into women's sports. Women's sports used to be something that many would suggest it's altruistic. Let's support women's sports, as though we were doing women a favor. Yep. But now that has changed, because women's sports has become such a revenue-generating model that it's not just doing women a favor like we used to try to flippantly suggest. Now there's a lot there. Can you elaborate on that and even what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a pleasure for me to be here, too. So many people on this panel have influenced me directly, and I've had a chance to work with. Thank you so much to all of you. Yeah, I'm now running a fund for Ariel Investments called Project Level, which invests in women's sports at scale across the whole ecosystem. And the reason we're excited about it is the quality of play on the pitch, court, and field. I think if you ask people in this room, you'd know that it's been at a high level for decades. You could each count 6 to a dozen female sports stars that have inspired you, inspired your family, that have been icons in your households. The economics never matched up to it because there wasn't the fundamental shift in how people view women's sports that has happened now. Right now, 41% of all high school athletes in the U.S. are girls. Participation in youth sports as girls is at its highest. What does that mean? That if you are in here and you know anyone who has kids for ages 5 to 18, you have been paying money on girls' sports, you have been spending your time on girls' sports, and those families have now become the natural fan base for professional women's sports in the future. So now viewership is up, sponsorship dollars are up, and there is a solid bow wave for the next 20 years that supports this economically, where the economics weren't there before. And we are not a social impact fund. We are not a charity. Our LPs expect commercial returns. And these women's franchises can now be run profitably. And if you take the tack like we are and many other investors are, and investing not just in the teams, but in the whole ecosystem, data analytics firms, ticketing companies, health and wellness interventions, real estate that surrounds sports venues, you get a really good portfolio that looks good to investors and that professionalizes all of women's sports, the way that Willow and Bob are trying to do in Angel City. And we invested in the NWSL on the heels of what they did. We are second in the cap table of the Denver NWSL expansion team. And we're seeing great success because of what Willow and Bob have done. We've sold 11,500 season tickets. We don't even play a game until 2026. Yeah. This is now a space that is completely viable from a financial standpoint, and that's changed the game.
Now, you all think the order of sitting in here is coincidental. It's not. I had to intentionally put Rich between Sam and A-Rod because in 2004, Sam's Red Sox were the first team in history to come back from a 3-0 deficit to go on to, I'll let y'all Google how it ends. But nonetheless, Sam, speaking of investing in sports, there's so many reasons to. There's a financial reason to, there's a community reason to, there is a social reason to. What would you suggest is the greatest reason to invest in sports?
Well, I think sports is the last sort of thing that can bring communities together. We do live in a very complicated, divisive world, and we started Fenway Sports Group with the simple notion in 2002 that investing in these clubs, these teams, these venues, these franchises, that we had an opportunity to get involved with a business that mattered more to its constituents than just about anything else. And I did meet my friend Alex back actually in 2003, and while our deal did not work out, he is the one that taught me about multifamily apartment investing. So Alex, thank you very much for that. And we've actually enjoyed an incredible relationship for the last 2.5 decades. Don't tell the Boston media. But we've really seen that if you invest in the right places with the right clubs in markets where the basketball team, the football team, the soccer team, the hockey team, the golf event, the golf tour matters more to the consumer, your invested capital is going to be in a good place. And then it's just like the rest of our businesses. You have to get the right people in the right positions to be successful. And the last thing I'll say about investing in sports, it is such early days. It was just 2019 that the North American major leagues allowed institutional capital to come into our teams and our cap tables. It used to just be high net worth individuals. But 2019, and Major League Baseball doesn't get enough credit for this, they changed the rules to allow for institutional capital. You're seeing it in the NFL, the NBA, and all these other leagues, and it's going to continue to fuel the growth of franchise values and the access to liquidity for people that have been in for a long time.
A-Rod, you were the one person up here uniquely went from player to owner, illustrious baseball career, but then now owner of the Timberwolves, owner of the Minnesota Lynx. Congrats to your T-Wolves, by the way, advancing to the second round, even though it was
Bravo.
Don't clap too loud. We're in L.A. Do not clap too loud. Okay, they beat the Lakers. Everybody calm down. No, A-Rod, congrats on that. But in all sincerity, what have you learned about being an owner that you may have been naive to as a player, and how are you influencing what you learned as a player to become a better owner now that you're an investor?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and it's great to be here today. It is such and I echo a lot of what my panelist members here have said. I think a few things. I think when you're an investor, like a lot of folks in this room, you're a fiduciary to people's capital. When you're a team owner, you're a fiduciary to their memories, their feelings, and sometimes even their happiness. And like Willow said, I mean, in a world that's so divided today, sports and music brings people together. But as far as player to owner, I really understand how players feel. And a lot of people say they do, but it's different when you're a player. You know, we have Anthony Edwards. I'm going to game 1 tomorrow against Golden State. And there's pressures besides just trying to win or go up against Steph. You have 40 or 50 family members probably that are flying in from Atlanta. You have to leave tickets. You have to deal with your agents. You have to deal with, you know, Sprite and Adidas. And it's not just playing the game. So just having a compassion and an empathy for players is never been such a great opportunity to make great capital for you and your family as a player, but it's also never been harder. And with this social media, there is no, I remember the days in Sports Illustrated where a story would come out on Sunday and you start getting the calls, but you had to Thursday before today is just like report and then fact check later. So empathy and sympathy for our players and compassion, and they are our partners. They're not just players. They're truly our partners, especially in the NBA.
Let's hone in on that for a moment, because Rich, when you talk about super agents, I don't know if you love the term, but it's true nonetheless.
I hate it.
He hates the term, but phenom. That's who and what Rich Paul is as far as an agent. A-Rod mentioned storytelling. He mentioned media. You have seen the landscape of sports and media change drastically in your tenure. Back in the day, an athlete may have a story, but it was someone like me on television who would create the narrative. Now the athletes with different podcasts, what you started with Uninterrupted, different of your players. Draymond Green has a pod, LeBron has a pod. Different athletes, they control the narrative. How athletes now influence media change the landscape of how we're consuming sports?
Again, thanks for having me as well. I think how they've changed it is maybe not changed, but they've definitely affected it in a way in which they can now push back on what used to be the narrative that whatever the writer wanted it to become. That was one of the reasons why my partners and I started Uninterrupted, was to be uninterrupted in your positioning and what you really wanted to get across to the fan base in that community. But I think it's important for the athlete to have a voice, but I also think it's important for them to, I would say, have an understanding of their platform while having a voice as well, because as we can see in today's media, it's gone away from what it was when Willow was front and center of it all, right? They pushed the sport in a certain way, they told stories a certain way, there was excitement around the game, etc. Today it's a lot more rah, 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 and a lot less education, excitement, insight, and things like that. And you have to talk about the debatable things, but it shouldn't be all that. So I think there's a balance that has to take place within, because it does have an effect as it pertains to whether people are investing and looking for ROI, or whether you have those brand partnerships that also are looking for an ROI through the lens of strategy and execution. So I think I've always been someone that wanted to help the guys understand how to have a platform and how to position yourself and what to say when having that platform.
I love that. Want to address a few housekeeping things. One, to the brilliant panelists to my left, feel free to just chime in. Don't wait on me to do anything. And then I also believe if they throw a QR code up behind me, you can use that QR code to ask questions. I think that's the case. If not, just see where the QR code takes you. Might be somewhere fun. Let's talk about ownership in sports. I want to direct this both to you, Willow, to Sam, to A-Rod. How important is the culture of an organization, right? Angel FC, Red Sox, Timberwolves. Even obviously you, Jason, Rich, you know it in a different way, but even you, Jason, with how the Commanders were able to turn around and make it to the playoffs. How important is the culture of an organization, and how can you change the culture of an organization, both in sport and even outside of sport that's applicable to everybody here?
No, you take it. Oh, I'm going to take it as the newcomer to this? Happy to. Look, I think anybody who's running a business will tell you culture, getting the culture of a business right is absolutely essential. You really can't have a winning enterprise, a high growth enterprise, a highly functioning enterprise without it. When I think about the team that we arrived at, they already had a really strong culture based on community impact, driving equity on and off the pitch, and creating an unparalleled experience for fans. So coming in and making sure that all those promises, that we make as a brand, our brand promise is reflected across all corners of the organization is essential. And just as for example, in our case, that meant investing, making sure that the appropriate amount of investment was directed to our players, to make sure that those players had the infrastructure, resources that they needed to excel at the highest level. And so I think you simply can't think about these teams without thinking about what they mean, what they stand for culturally, and that's on the pitch or on the field or on the court as well as in the business office.
Listen, we need to celebrate. I couldn't agree more with what Willow said. We need to celebrate our tradition and our history and our past. But if we are bound to it, we are dead. We are dead. We're not going to innovate. We're not going to move forward. At Fenway Sports Group, we came in 2002. John Henry and Tom Werner put this deal together with an idea that we were going to bring a World Series championship to Boston. Hadn't happened at that point in 84 years. We got it done in 2004 after the guys broke the hearts in 2003. But then we said, what's next? What are we going to do next? We got involved in NASCAR. We got involved in Liverpool. We got involved in real estate. We got involved in the professional golf, Tomorrow Golf. It's a culture of what's next? How can we be entrepreneurial? Alex talked about empathy for players and partnership with players. We just recently created a new business with the PGA Tour called PGA Tour Enterprises, where every single member of the old 501c6 membership organization is now an equity owner in their league. We stood up a $14 billion business. We invested $1.5 billion of capital. Like Jason said, this is not charity, seeking a return. But we are challenging the old way of thinking at Fenway Sports Group and pushing forward with an entrepreneurial spirit. Again, celebrating our no more tradition than English soccer and Liverpool Football Club in terms of how important traditions are in the sport, but bringing the most beautiful, diverse roster of players in there changed the trajectory of that football club forever.
Hey, Rod, can we speak to diversity, both of thought, diversity of roster, diversity of mind? You reminded me, I think it was, of a story, maybe 2008 or 9. Y'all win the World Series with an incredibly diverse roster. You had to lay your pride, potentially ego, if you had one at the time, to the side, shortstop to third baseman. You end up winning it all. Can you piggyback on Sam's point regarding diversity?
Yeah, look, I think it's interesting. We're in a very interesting time today with NIL, right? A lot of these young people, and I believe they should be getting a lot. But with that, there should be an exchange. And you have to practice loyalty. And if my daughter's going to be NCAA athlete, I'm okay with her getting money, but I also want her to do her chores, meaning you may have to stay there for 3 or 4 years, or you may have to get a college degree. You can't get millions of dollars and then say, Coach, I don't like what you said, and I'm gone. So to answer your question about 2009, we had 04 was a very painful year, due to Sam and his squad. But 5 years later, we were able to, finish our mission and win the world title. And when George Steinbrenner called me, he said, there's an opportunity to come to New York. We already have a good shortstop. I said, I know, he's a friend. And so I moved to third base. And the payoff was 5 years later. But one quick story about, and this is a kind of conversation that I'm sure a lot of you had to deal with, Zoom and bringing people back to the office. I think when you think about culture, it happens face-to-face. Mm-hmm. It's so much easier to walk to your partner's office, next door or down the hall than have 17 emails exchanged go back and forth. So my experience, and this has a little bit to do with Sam, but Sam, I haven't told you this story. We're facing Pedro Martinez in the World Series in 2009. It's an hour before the game, and it's Game 6 at Yankee Stadium. We have Andy Pettitte pitching Game 6. We felt really good about that because Andy's a big game pitcher. And, you know, the night before we're facing Pedro Martinez, I usually have formulated a game plan with Pedro. Unfortunately, I have a terrible record against Pedro Martinez. For whatever reason, I don't see the ball well. So it's an hour before the game, World Series, biggest game of my career, and I still haven't formulated my game plan. So where Rich is right here is where you have Matsui, and this is now 45 minutes before game time, right? And I'm right here, and we're both taping our ankles. And I'm still trying to think about Pedro. How am I going to attack him? How is he going to attack me? And I said, Matsu, and he speaks very, very little English. I said, Matsu, what's your game plan against Pedro tonight? And he says, oh, big smile. Matsu doesn't smile much. And he goes, very good. I see the ball very good. I see the ball like a beach ball. I go, well, crap, I see it like a golf ball. So tell me more, Matsu. And he goes, ooh, I just see the ball comes out of his hand. I know what he's throw, boo, home run. I go, oh, that easy, huh? So I said, a light went up. And I said, I know what my game plan is today, is to pass the baton. If I can walk or get on base, I'm going to let him be the hero, not me, because I can't see the damn ball. So I hit cleanup. He hit fifth. But here's the key. For 145 games, we had the same exact 5 or 6 guys. So some of the blind spots in sports is continuity. Continuity. To know what each other's going to do, finish each other's sentences, right? So sure enough, we now go into the game. I think I walked 3 or 4 times that day. He had 2 home runs, double, had like 9 RBIs or whatever it was, and he won the MVP. So my point about culture is we've been 4 or 5 years together. We've been through a lot of ups and downs. We suffered the 2004 disaster. And 5 years later, we paid that off by communicating, by having the right culture, by having trust, and by being vulnerable, because I told him, I can't see the ball against Pedro. So when I see it like a beach ball, I said, we got something.
I want to touch on the culture from my perspective. It's a little bit different. It's so important from a culture perspective, and I think to have a great culture, you need to have care and details within, because those 2 things allow you to implement the proper infrastructure, right? These kids get drafted. We don't control sometimes you control where they get drafted, but in most cases you don't control where they get drafted at. But they have to lean on the ownership groups to have the right resources and have the right care to help them, 1, develop, and then 2, have the right pieces in place. He has Anthony Edwards. As good as he is, he cannot win without having the right pieces in place, and you have to be willing to pay the tax and pay the repeater tax, and those are big numbers. When you buy these teams, it's not just the purchase of that team. What does the practice facility look like? Are you building a new one? You know, how many PT people travel with the team? You know, are you going to let the family on the plane? They have so many different things, but it matters. And we have this GOAT conversation.
Rich, real quick, speak to why that matters, because I feel like so often in sports, like you all get to consume the sport, but an athlete plays, they had a good game, they had a bad game. You think their jump shot was just off, not realizing the girlfriend, the boyfriend called them beforehand that their tickets weren't under their name, and so the athlete has to handle the ticket reservations. You think, they just missed that tackle, made that tackle, they missed that PK, they made that PK, they couldn't see the ball, they could see the ball, when there's so much more to it. Can you elaborate for those in the audience as to why that matters? Or any example?
Yeah, no. I mean, there's several examples. I mean, just from a physicality perspective, if you don't have enough massage therapists or PT, and I'm a player, I have to wait and I miss that. That could be the difference between my legs being there in the 4th quarter or not. Just the proper chefing, just so many different things that go into it, right? And so I was going to say, when you have these who the best conversations, you have to pair these guys with the front office and the ownership group. And that becomes the GOAT conversation amongst athletes, because I've seen the good and I've also seen the bad. And one of the best organizations to do it has been San Antonio in our league. When you go, I just was there. I went after a game to the Spurs club, and I had one of the best meals I've had all year, and I travel all around the world. At 1 o'clock in the morning, at an NBA organization's restaurant.
Yep.
That's just real. I can't tell you when the last time they won a championship, but they have a championship culture all the time, and that matters.
I was just there too, and I was blown away by the way in which it was designed with the players in mind and how deeply they care and how much they center culture. But Rich, I'm wondering, like, I see it through the lens of students, how much they enter, and when they get ready to graduate and get jobs, how they assess culture really quickly. Are your young athletes able to, in that environment, assess the culture, and how much do they care, and how much do you have to teach them why it's important?
We built Klutch Sports Group off the foundation of always doing what's best for the client. Even if we don't make money, always do what's best for the client. From a representation, I won't use super age, I hate that term. But from a representation perspective, my thing has always been knowing the player and then trying to get them to the right fit. It's always been fit over pick. Tyrese Maxey was not the 21st pick in the draft, talent-wise. But if I can get him to Philadelphia, we've seen where it's gotten him. And these kids don't care as much because they come through an environment of AAU. There's a ranking system, and then when you look at the mock draft, because there's a scaled salary, the first thing their family is looking at is, oh, if they don't go number 2, they don't make this much money. Well, let's flip that on its head. If you go number 2, and this happens to a lot of people, and you don't get that second deal, then you've made that much money, and your career's over at 27. You're broke. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, because you got 30 dependents, and you have no other way to have earning power. But if you go number 7 or number 12, and it happens to be a great fit for you, and you get 3 bites at the apple, you may learn something while getting those 3 bites to allow you to diversify, meet great people like in this room, be better educated, et cetera. And you just understand money a lot different at 32, hopefully, than you did at 22. And so, no, they don't understand it. And this is where the agent or the representation gets the bad rap, because most guys are focused on the higher you go, I can go in your living room and talk to the next parent to get the next top player. We don't care about that. We want you to get to the right place, because if you don't get this second deal, remember, you didn't finish school either. So our guys are only in college for like 6 days. They're not there, right? And so NIL has helped, but it's tough for these athletes. It's really tough for them.
Well, Rich, you are an exception to the rule because you've built trust with these athletes. You can't talk to many of them like that unless you've built deep trust to give them real guidance on their long-term earnings and their long-term potential. And it takes a unique person to be able to do that. And I think implicitly what you've built at Klutch and everybody's talking about in culture is that you have to define culture very specifically in order to maintain it over time. And you have to measure it in a way. You have to have a set of values that everybody can say and repeat. Like what we had to do at the Commanders, because when I took over, it was good culture would not describe what we took over when I took over that team in 2020. We had to completely break down and rebuild that organization, and that includes defining culture in a very strict way and being willing to move people out, even if they are important and influential and powerful, if they don't fit that culture. You have to hold to it strong. We turned over 85% of the workforce at the Commanders, and if I could go back in time, I would do it faster. I didn't do it quickly enough in order to establish the momentum that is now there, both on the business and football side. Adam Peters, who's the GM now, he defines the people he drafts in a very specific way and calls them a commander. He looks at college athletes and said, this person is a commander because of these 6 attributes that they measure on a regular basis. I did the same thing on the business side. And everybody here who has sustained culture over the long haul has done that. And that is what's important. We're now owning teams, and now going from the operator's chair to the owner's chair of owning teams and helping League One Volleyball, another one of our investments, establish their culture and their vision. We are defining it very specifically. These are the kind of athletes we're going to bring in. These are the kind of people we're going to bring in. And by the way, every year, we're not just going to evaluate their performance on the pitch or in the boardroom. We're also going to measure how they did it, how they treated people along the way.
Yes, I like to add about Klutch, just one thing, if I may. You know, when you do business with Klutch, and this goes credit to Rich is sports like business is all about relationships. And you do business with two kind of people you like and people you trust. Simple as that, right? And you rather do business with people like that even if the deal's not as good because you trust them and you like them. And when you talk to Rich, and Rich, by the way, has given me great advice over the years, but if I'm dealing with him about a player or someone he represents, he's going to shoot with me straight. There's been many times that he's given me advice that does not benefit him or Klutch. So that's when I know that somebody's in it for the long run. And Rich has built a company that's going to be around 30, 40, 50 years from now because of that. It's not about the transaction right now, but Rich rather take 90%, not all the time, 90%. Sometimes I hope 85%, but
Just for
90%
Timberwolves
for a
deals.
long-term relationship. And there's not a lot of, I don't call him an agent. I call him a business partner and a developer of the business and a developer of careers and a curator, right? So relationships are everything in business and in sports.
I remember asking Rich one time, I asked him, I said, hey, they say you shouldn't do business with friends. I don't know, Rich, if you remember this conversation. I said, but Rich, the majority of the people you do business with are your friends. And he responded to me, he simply said, don't do business with friends who don't do business.
That.
So I said, because I was trying to get in business with different friends and I've been scared off, like, do not do business with friends. He said, I don't do business with friends who don't do business. And I'll never forget, that stuck with me to this day. How much patience are you supposed to exude in all of this? I heard one time it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. Sam, y'all got it right recently with Liverpool. I believe the coach, Arne Slot, if I may, y'all just won the 20th championship about 2 or 3 weeks ago. 5th coach in Premier Football Club history to win in his first year. Y'all got it right instantly. Jason, y'all turned things over in Washington, what would appear to be instantly. How much patience, Willow, Sam, Jason, how much patience, Sam, I'll start with you, are you supposed to have in all of this?
A tremendous amount. If I listed all the mistakes we've made in 24 years at Fenway Sports Group, we would be here for a long, long, long time. Couldn't agree more with what Alex said about relationships. I'm sure I've only been in the sports business my whole career. I got in as an intern with Alex's New York Yankees in 1993. And truer words have never been spoken about relationships driving everything. And Rich is right. We all do become friends in this business. And you quickly learn who you can trust and who you cannot. And I would say the lion's share of people in our industry, you can trust. It is an amazing business. It is full of people that are passionate, that want to win. None of us are patient enough, especially with the dailiness of the media in Boston or Liverpool or Pittsburgh or wherever we're operating. But you have to do the right things over and over and over and over and over again. And hopefully if you make more proper decisions than wrong decisions, you'll end up winning World Series championships and English Premier League titles, and we haven't won a Stanley Cup yet. That's next for us, we hope. But you have to have a ton of patience, and frankly, that's where owners and ownership groups get in trouble when they deviate from a plan and doing things the right way. The underpinning of all of our leagues, there's a certain economic system. All of these economic systems are driven to what? Drive parity and competitive balance. So there are no shortcuts. You have to do things the right way, and you have to be patient. But a lot of type A personalities, a lot of incredible athletes that want to win right now. So it's a balance. The push and pull of what's right for the long term and what's right for tonight's game is the balance in sports, and it's really, really hard.
I completely agree, and Sam hit the key point. It's consistency over time, and it's really hard in sports because we're inundated with the headlines. It's what all you guys are checking your phones on in between sessions. What's the score of the game? What's the latest gossip about trades and whatever your preferred sport is? Those headlines inundate us, and if you are not disciplined and you can't control your emotions as an ownership group or a leadership group, you will go off course of something that you have set up to be successful over the long haul. And you have to remember the law of averages. There's so many things that can go right and wrong on the margins that are not in your control. Just because you didn't win the championship this year and you were one game short doesn't mean you need to overhaul everything and throw the baby out with the bathwater. That is really hard. Great businessmen and women in other industries come to sports and lose their minds. And they operate completely differently than they built their successful business on. And those that can stay disciplined and focused do that. And it's not just on the operating side, it's also on the investing side. Funds that do well have a thesis that they hold to. Like, we believe women's sports is the small cap of sports. Undervalued, high growth, misunderstood, the same way that Ariel Investments has made a name for itself in the markets writ large. We could get thrown off of that by the next shiny object or the pressure to get in a league at all costs instead of looking for value. But we are going to stick to our strategy, and that's going to make us successful over the long haul. But it is hard.
Yeah.
You got to tune it out and control your emotions.
We only have 20 more minutes remaining. Reminder to use that QR code, submit audience questions. Stop asking me if the Timberwolves are going to win the series, please. Willow, let me ask you a question. Because
but actually, I may want to follow up on that. I am taking the lesson of patience, as I think you suggested. People who come from outside of sports ownership really need to have a little patience, a little more patience. And I wholeheartedly agree with that in terms of building a winning culture. You know, in our case, on the pitch, that takes years. It takes a consistent strategy. It takes a consistent and a culture that is reflected across the organization. But I also feel at this moment we have to seize the urgency of this moment, and particularly what that means in the growth, accelerating the growth of women's sports. I think this is a unique moment in time where we have the intersection of what's going on in technology and media, opening up access to sports for new generations of fans to consume anywhere on any device they want. We have a new generation of athletes that has never been more talented, is better resourced than it's been, and also knows and understands how to engage with those audiences. Turns out women are really, really good at it. And then we have a whole lot of data that allows us to accelerate, right, and amplify our efforts. So while I'm taking the patience message to heart, I also feel like this is a moment where we do need to, in some instances, we need to move fast.
Well, I want to add to what you said, because I completely agree with you. When we first invested in the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Minnesota Lynx, the Lynx, like the Red Sox, have 4 titles and almost won another one just last year. We lost to Liberty in a close game. But we get more calls. We get 5 calls to every one of the Timberwolves for the Lynx. People wanted to invest in the Lynx than the Timberwolves. And my daughters at dinner the other night were asking me, what's the difference in investing? And I said, think about investing for the Timberwolves in the NBA as Facebook today in 2025. The Lynx, you're investing in Facebook, but in 2010. So it's a much different investment profile. But I do want to just not warn, but that's not a nice word for caution folks on what Sam was talking about. Is they look at Fenway Group, or they look at what Josh Harris and Blitzer are doing, or they look at what the Leonsis Group is doing in Washington. These platforms have been built in over 25 years, a little bit short, a little bit plus, and it's very hard to do. And I'm a big believer in, don't go wide and shallow, but go narrow and deep. And focus, and laser focus is one of the biggest arbitrages that we have in sports and in business. So not everyone can be like Fenway. This has taken a really long time. And they do it as well as anybody with Tom Warner, John Henry, and Sam. And I've met their senior management team is incredible. But I've seen so many ownership groups that are trying to come in, and they say, what's next, what's next, what's next? Well, they won 4 championships over the last 20 years. I hate to say that. The Red Sox have won 4 titles. I can't believe it's coming out of my mouth. But they've mastered one, and then they've gone one at a time. They went to Pittsburgh or the NHL. They have soccer across the world. They're like next maybe in the NBA, but it's one step at a time. And they've done it with great people with a long-term approach.
I like that a lot. I got a question for you, actually, A-Rod, that just came to mind. Being a player, but then being an owner. I've seen you courtside at the T-Wolves games after a major win. You're super excited. What is the difference emotionally between being player and being owner?
Well, I'm a mess. That's why I'm a complete bozo and buffoon out there, because I get so excited and so nervous because I can't control anything, right? And it's such an incredible feeling. Look, I played for almost 25 years, Seattle, Texas, and New York for about 15, and it wasn't a linear path. My ups and downs have been very public, and I honestly think that's the greatest thing I can offer our players, both the men and the women, is they can learn from my mistakes. I've made every mistake in the book, and like Sam said, if I talk about my mistakes, we don't have enough time over this Milken week or months, but along the way, I've learned some great lessons, and I've grown from those. So when I sit down with Anthony Edwards or I sit down with Julius Randle, I know what it is to play in New York, to be in the New York Post 9 times in 1 week, right? Because you have page 6 and you have right? That's a lot. So when they're able to call me and almost not cry on my shoulders, but be a sympathetic person for them to hear. I grew up, my mom collected food stamps when I was 12 years old. A lot of our players did the same thing. I'm a person of black and brown skin, just like them. So it's really an emotional endeavor, a civic duty in many ways. And in many ways, it's a great business. And even though it's a private business, it's just like running a public company because it's the most public investment we're ever going to make. And it's a huge, huge responsibility.
Rich, really quickly before I open it up to these questions, let's talk about athletes and branding. Using that word public, athletes are front-facing. You get a lot of brand opportunities for your different athletes. Do you say yes to them all because money is money? Is there bad money? How do you decipher what deal you do with what athlete and which deal you turn down?
Well, I think you have to kind of sit in the middle. I think from a brand perspective, we try to educate the brand in terms of not focusing on the popularity, but really focus on the professional and having that professional as positioned with popularity. And then on the athlete side, again, helping them understand what it's like to be a true brand partner. Because those deliverables, your stats don't make your deliverables no longer deliverables, right? And so the one thing that we've been able to do, especially with LJ, is he was such a great brand partner that we had our pick of the litter, and then we scaled it down. And just a lot of times, again, there's a miseducation around the athlete to what that means to be a brand partner. They looking at the check. That's it. That's all they want to look at. They're not looking at the deliverables, and it's not just the deliverables. If you have to be on set at 10 o'clock, like, we're there like 8:30, 8:45. And then while there, it's not like I have to pull teeth to get you to do something. You got the money already. This is like you want to really come through and if they're asking for 8 hours, we always thought, how do we finish in 6? And then before we leave there, how do we shake every person's hand that was there? Because that's going to get them to call us back. And so I think it's a balance of both and trying to help these brands really understand the athlete and help athletes understand partnership.
Going now to the audience questions. Again, remember to submit your questions. Willow, question for you. Looking into your crystal ball 5 years from now, where do you think the biggest growth metric for women's sports is? If women's sports, what specific area?
So I think, thank you for the question. I think there are a handful of short-term tactical goals which will deliver growth, which all entail closing the gaps. Closing the gaps in merchandise, closing the gap in media, and closing the gap in sponsorship. When we look at merch, boy, does it skew male, pun intended. For every 9 SKUs, get the pun, of men's merchandise, there's 1 for women. That's a gap that we should close quickly and will deliver enterprise value. When you look at sponsorship, 9% of roughly sponsorship goes to women's sports. Again, given the ROIs on these the audiences for women's sports will over-deliver for sponsors. They engage with players, women players will over-deliver for those sponsors. That's a gap that's immediately addressable with a strong ROI for those sponsors and for the teams. And then likewise media, 15% of media right now, sports media, is dedicated to women's sports. That's a gap. By the way, the Annenberg School is all in to help fill that gap with lots of talented journalists and folks who will help with branding and PR. That's another gap to close. So if I look into my crystal ball, the best case scenario is that we have those gaps closed in 5 years, and we've driven massive enterprise growth across women's sports.
Let me add to that. I think we're already there. I think she hit on all the metrics that we should look at. But I don't even think we need to look out 5 years to see these already happening. There's a few things that people probably don't realize unless you study women's sports the way that me and Willow and others have who are in the space. The last World Cup, most watched sporting event in the world, the last World Cup finals for the men and women, there were 300 million more viewers of the women's World Cup final than the men's.
Yep.
$300 million more on the women's than the men's. The WNBA has gone up 48% in attendance year over year. The NWSL is up 26% in attendance year over year. This year's women's Final Four was up 200% in sponsorship dollars. Like, all of these metrics are already happening. Even what Willow and Bob came in and did in investing in Angel City, I think they made a great investment. The people before them, they bought in at $5 million. Purportedly, we don't know exactly what the valuation is. Somewhere around $250 million is what Willow and Bob came in and got the team for. That is a return any of us would take in this room, and it's going higher from that. Whenever Willow and Bob sell, they're going to make great money too. So the numbers are already there. These are the things we should watch, but we have made it. It's actually already stable, and that's why there's so much institutional capital now interested.
Question for Sam. Love this question. How do you prioritize local focus and trust in the communities while building multinational sport and multi-conglomerates that require a little more vast breadth?
Well, Alex will love this story. 2004, we win the World Series. 2007, we win the World Series. We started to think
Alex
about.
will love that part of the story?
Yeah. We started to think about what's next. We met with Michael Porter, famous strategy professor at Harvard Business School, and he said, guys, you got to use your geographical leverage. Let's go buy the Celtics. Let's go buy the Bruins. Let's talk to the Kraft family. Maybe you can invest in the Patriots. And 3 months later, we met with him again, and he said, what'd you decide? We said, we're buying Liverpool Football Club. What? So we have taken an approach that is a little bit non-traditional, little inconsistent with the idea that we can get geographical leverage with our sponsors, our ticket buyers, our premium buyers, the media partners in the market. And we have gone out outside of the Boston, New England region to find brands, teams, clubs, opportunities, again, that mean more in that local community than anything else. But it does present problems at times. When we're successful in Liverpool, sometimes our fans in Boston get upset. Why aren't you investing more in the Red Sox? We put money into a practice facility in Pittsburgh for the Penguins. Why can't we do that over here in Liverpool? So we have to make sure that we are focusing on the operators in each market, giving them the resources that they need to be successful. And it is a challenge being spread all over the world, but it's very much an affirmative strategy that we've had going all the way back to 2002.
Speaking of challenge, Rich, this question for you. NIL, I'm sure, has made you have to spread yourself thin. Back in the day, you were recruiting athletes after they graduated from college. NIL, now you're recruiting athletes after they graduate from high school. How has NIL changed Klutch Sports?
Well, remember initially, we at Klutch did the first $1 million internship with Darius Baisley and New Balance, which expedited NIL because he didn't go to Syracuse. He went and worked at New Balance in Boston and was paid to do so and became a first-round pick. We always led with the protection of your name, image, and likeness. So that's how we talk to families about NIL. And then from there, helping them understand that this is now income. You have to pay taxes on it first and foremost. And I always say to the athletes, you don't need much, and so you got to decide how you want to spend this money or position this money. I don't think you need to go in every store on Rodeo. I think you could just wear your team sweatsuit and save that money, and hopefully you can get it invested with some of these people here. But for us, it has, on the basketball front, we are getting kids $4 to $5 million for 6 to 8 months of being a student athlete. And in football, it's based upon position and obviously institution. If you're going to Ohio State or Texas, they got big budgets. If you're going to one of the smaller universities, it's different. I do agree with what A-Rod was saying as it pertains to teaching these young men and women about just being a great partner from an NIL perspective, and that there should be some sense of, if I'm paying you, the contractual obligation has to come with integrity. And I think this idea of being able to make money, and then we want you to make money, but then wipe away the integrity that comes with being what I would say for them is a semi-pro, but it's really just pro sports nowadays. I think that needs to be corrected, and there needs to be some type of balance. But, like anything, you adjust. So we've adjusted to the NIL space for sure.
Only have 5 more minutes remaining. Appreciate y'all's patience with us. Hopefully this has been as engaging for you all as it has for me. Hey, Rob, the question here for you, what has been the most challenging decision you've had to make as an owner? And they ask, how did it change the direction of the franchise? But I will ask, how did it change you personally?
Probably having to call Rich on a contract. That's probably the hardest thing on some of his reps. Is your question is, how has it changed me to being an owner versus a player?
No, like, what's the most challenging decision you've had to make, and has it changed you personally? I know people, owners, when they have to cut players, it's made them more empathetic. Sometimes it's made them less empathetic.
Yeah, this goes back to what I said earlier about really understanding what the players are going through. As an example, when we had to trade Cat, we traded Cat to the Knicks. We showed up at his house. He had a bunch of people there. We showed up with a champagne bottle. And we said, we have good news, bad news, big bro. By the way, we have the second highest salary in the NBA, number 2. But we said, we got to come off you, and we got to trade you. But we traded to your hometown in New York. They're thrilled to have you. And we kind of gave him a little bit more, which I won't share here, but it was an emotional connection. And when he left, he landed in a good place. It's been an extraordinary move for the Knicks. It's been a very solid move. We're very happy with Julius Randle. And that was a win-win situation. But he didn't read it on Twitter or X, and it was done the proper way. And I said, if I ever got traded, that's exactly how Tom Hicks came to me when I was in Texas, when he traded me to George Steinbrenner before we almost had to deal with Sam and the Red Sox. So those kind of things go a long ways because the community talks. And sure enough, about a week later, he was on with Brunson on his podcast, and he went on and on and on about how we handled it. So therefore, we got great feedback from the league on how to handle something. That was the toughest.
Was that an intentional decision to trade him to his hometown? Because sometimes I do know coaches that are like, hey, we'll trade you, but we will honor your trade request, or hey, we got to trade you wherever. Was that intentional to trade him to his hometown?
We were in conversations with the Knicks for a couple of years about other things and different businesses, and the Cat conversation always came up. They had the space in the cap, and obviously they're New York, so they have great resources. He's a hometown kid there. And we knew how much they liked him, and we really liked Julius, and for us, the big difference was getting Dante over the top. So once we got Julius, Dante, and a first-round pick, then we were on the money. So we first went to him first, and then we messaged that to the world. And actually, he broke the news because he put a little emoji on his X account, which was cool. But again, those kind of things, they seem small, but they're just really, in the long run, they're very important.
That's really cool.
Willow, we have 3 more minutes left. I kind of want to lay out for you all to discuss, but I'll ask you somewhat of a pointed question. Jason mentioned a word about 10 minutes ago, misunderstood. What would you suggest is the most misunderstood thing about women's sports?
I think there's still, even with the optimism that you express, I think that they are still considered by many to be just a smaller or less expensive version of men's sports.
Yeah.
And they are most certainly not. They are a unique entity of themselves, in and of themselves, really exploding at a unique moment in contemporary culture with a distinct trajectory, a distinct set of needs and opportunities for these extraordinary athletes that are distinct and different and should be celebrated as such.
Maybe I'll add. Can I add to that?
Please.
I think originally you think of the women's sports fans as almost like an activist fan group that is in it for the betterment of women, and that still exists. But there's the hashtag everybody watches women's sports. This is absolutely true. And I didn't know this until we got into our Denver team. We did an analysis of our season ticket member base. There's only 11% overlap with our season ticket member base and the rest of sports fans across Denver. That means 89% of the people paying good money to be season ticket holders on a women's sports team are net new to paying money on sports. I thought our number was wrong, so I went and asked a WNBA team who is owned by their NBA team in the same stadium for their number. Their overlap was 8%. So 92% of their season ticket member base are people who have never spent money in that arena before. So women's sports is the growth engine for all of sports. Not just women's sports. And that's what Willow is saying. And I think is the most misunderstood thing. This is not a niche. It's not a subgroup. This is the future.
Yeah.
Let me add one real-life example to what Jason and Willow just said. So last year in the Western Conference Finals, one of my friends flew up from New York, and about 20 rows up, Western Conference Finals, probably game 4 or 5, one of those games. He got a ticket that was twice as expensive as the same ticket for the women's. So the women's Lynx team, Western Conference Finals, was double the price as the male on the same price, right? So it is and by the way, we've also have a great history in Minnesota with the Lynx, but it is real, and the numbers suggest it. And I think there's a lag, to Willow's point. Maybe in 2 or 3 years, people will really know tangibly how real it is, but it's real because we're seeing it in the numbers and we're seeing it in the data.
Hardest hitting question I have all day. Alex, Timberwolves in how many games?
No chance. I like what Big Perk said. He said Ant-Man, Superman, Batman, Lakers in 5. But it was the wrong way. But I'm gonna stay away from predictions. Golden State they're gonna be a tough battle. It should be fun. I'll be there tomorrow night.
Absolutely. That's Jason. That's A-Rod. That's Rich. That's Sam. This is Willow Bay. Thank y'all so much.
Guys.
Great job, guys. Thank you.
Thank you for attending our lunch program. Be sure to utilize the mobile app to stay up to date on the latest changes. Check out what is happening at the Wellness Garden and other fun offerings throughout the conference. The next session will begin at 2:30 p.m.